G'day guys, it's Ben and Simon Everingham here from Pumped on Property, and in today's video we're going to talk about how you can build momentum as a property investor. So if it's your first time on our channel, please subscribe. In today's video we're really going to talk about this concept of the flywheel, and I'm also going to talk about my concept of the seed. Really sort of interesting ways to think about building momentum and how that momentum creates action and results in itself over time. We're also going to talk a little bit about timing and how it can take a little bit longer than most investors think to really become successful as an investor. And then we're going to talk about our 4 ideas around how property investors can build momentum in their own life to achieve a life where they are financially free in the future and, you know, money is coming in whether they're awake or asleep. So the first concept in today's video is really this idea of the flywheel, which Jim Collins wrote about in his book From Good to Great. And the flywheel concept is very simple. Effectively, the flywheel is like a 5,000 pound, I'm not sure how to reverse that back into kilos, that's how he describes it because he's an American guy.
About 2,500
kilos, so a couple of tons. Effectively, it's a huge concrete wheel, and inside that concrete wheel is a very high concentration of steel in the center of that. And so what he talks about with this idea is when you push this concrete wheel, which is obviously massive, it can take, you know, just as a regular person like you or I, a huge amount of energy just to get the wheel turning at all, and then to a huge amount of energy and time to really get it doing a rotation, and then multiple rotations. But what happens with this flywheel is all of the energy is put out at the start, and then over time it begins creating its own energy to the point where it's almost impossible to stop and can really take on a life force of its own. So why I think that's so relevant to property investing is, as investors, you know, we get really caught up with learning as much as we need to learn, identifying the right strategy, understanding the market, learning the ideas about negotiating, building our team of advisors, obviously executing and buying the property, figuring out property management, insurance, and then, you know, we go through this huge journey, and then with most people, you know, still don't end up in financial freedom in the future, because even with all of that, they still make mistakes. And so what's really important from my perspective is to go out and build a really good foundation of ideas, of knowledge, of skills, of tools that can really set you up to buy the right property. So instead of, like me, rushing out there and buying 11 properties over 8 years, you can buy, you know, 2 or 3 really high quality properties over a lifetime that takes all of the pressure off you and your family to achieve what it is that you really want to achieve. And another way of describing this is the concept of the seed. I did see this when I was at uni in that movie The Secret. Whatever your thoughts are and whatever my thoughts are on that, you know, this was something that I took out of it, and that is, you know, again, you know, most people are always looking at the results, and my hand here is supposed to be the soil and the ground, and you plant the seed below the soil, and all of this stuff is happening down here, but it does take time before you actually see a result or that seed breaking through the soil. And so many people spend their life, you know, just about to break through in terms of knowledge, skills, tools, properties that they buy, but they never quite break through because they can't see that result immediately. And so I think it's really important to begin to understand timing and how momentum can work in your favor, and the fact that yes, it's going to be freaking difficult for the first 12 months that you're investing in property. Yes, it can be really challenging for the first 5 or 10 years that you don't start to see the fruit of that labor. But if you have the right strategy, you are disciplined, and you actually execute effectively, the results can be incredible, and over time they will compound and create the life that you want. So, you know, just sliding past my little board there, let's talk about time a little bit, Simon, and the fact that it does take longer than most people expect to actually get to that financially free point, because this isn't the channel where we talk about Lambos and mansions and achieving it all in 12 months. This is the reality of the world, where it does take time to do this stuff.
Yeah, that's so right, and we preach the fact that timing is absolutely key when investing in any asset. But the fact that you need to really have a long-term outlook with this, as you're mentioning with the flywheel and the seed, you know, it's not instant gratification that you're going to get from these things. It's really a delayed gratification, and that can be really hard to swallow, that bitter pill in the beginning. Like me, for example, I'm on the journey to my first property at the moment, and I've been saving my ass off for the last 18 months, and I just feel as though I haven't really done anything for myself over that period of time, and I'm earning good money and I'm working really hard. I just wanted to do something for myself, and I was a couple of weeks ago I was in the bike shop about to buy myself a $3,000 bike, and then I just had a thought to myself, and I'm like, come on, Simon, like don't be an idiot. Like, you know what you've been working towards for the last 18 months. Don't put that on hold by another 2 to 3 months just because you feel as though you need something right now. And like, the reason I share that story is because you really need to understand the long-term picture, and the fact that yes, these things take a lot of time and effort. As Ben was saying, that the compound effect of all of the knowledge that you gather, all of the skills that you acquire, and all of the research and study that you do over that period of time, it takes a very long time to actually see a result and move forward. And that's why you just really need to create a great strategy. You need to have a long-term outlook. You need to look at the long-term benefits. Like, I don't want to end up on the pension when I'm 80 years of age, so that's why I need to make some sacrifices today and acquire some skills and knowledge that I need to make sure that in the future I can have a nice, happy lifestyle and do whatever it is I want to do, and support the people around me as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to remember, that it is going to happen. Like the flywheel, building momentum, you will get to financial freedom if you're diligent, if you're disciplined, if you've got the right strategy, and if you execute on it effectively. But it's not going to happen by wishing for it. It's not going to happen by consuming endless information and then scaring yourself. It's not going to happen through focusing 100% on your day job that makes you $60,000 or $200,000 a year at the expense of making in the future hundreds of thousands of dollars a year without going to work. It's not going to happen if all you do is spend time with people that aren't financially free. It's not going to happen if you don't go out there and build the tools and actually get specific on the things that really matter, which we will talk about in a moment. So I think another really important thing when thinking about how to build momentum as a property investor is this concept of timing. Now, we will talk about that more in a moment, but timing is so valuable and so important to understand. And timing means a lot of different things to a lot of people, but effectively what we're talking about here is understanding global cycles, understanding local cycles, and using the momentum of that knowledge to actually effectively time your assets, or when you buy, when you sell. So effectively, we really want to be buying in things like the mid-cycle slowdowns and the global financial crises or depressions, and we really want to be consolidating or selling properties at, just before those events occur, when you can get the highest possible price point. So, the way that you could think about this in real terms is buying in Sydney in 2010 and selling in 2016 type thing. And over that period of time, you would have made some excellent gains on the right type of property. You could be thinking about Brisbane in the same way, sort of beginning to consider buying Brisbane now, and potentially, if you're looking for an exit strategy, selling in 2024 or something like that. So timing is really important, and there's some really good resources around that. So let's talk about that for a moment in terms of this concept of how to build momentum through investing in property. I think learning is the foundation for anything. The deeper the foundation, if you just want to build a 60 mil foundation, then you can chuck a residential house on it. If you want to build a skyscraper in your life in terms of your financial independence and really go to that next level, then a 60 mil, foundation just isn't going to do the trick. It's going to have to be stories and stories high type thing. So what are some of the resources that you found from a learning perspective that can really help with this building momentum and the right types of ideas, so that you don't make mistakes and you buy better quality assets longer term?
Well, I want to link it back to what you were talking about, timing there, and a few really great resources that we utilise and what everybody else should utilise as well, to make sure that they understand those global cycles, to overlay that into their local cycles and make sure that they're purchasing the right assets at the right time, because we don't want to be purchasing at the peak of the market and we don't want to be purchasing at the bottom of the market. So there's two people that we follow. The first one is Phil Anderson. He's an Australian economist who wrote a book called The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking. And what he talks about is the 18-year property cycle. And he's actually one of the guys that shorted the 2008 global financial crisis and made a bucket load of cash off that, according to him.
Yeah.
And he's actually looking to break a record in the next recession as well. So for you to get a better understanding of timing and cycles, it's definitely recommended to go out there and purchase that book, which is going to put you at such an advantage compared to most other investors out in the market. And then who's the other guy you're talking about?
Yeah, so there's another author called Fred Harrison. I've just finished a couple of his books. Fred Harrison basically did a 200-year study of England and basically the booms and busts in the property and stock markets over there. One of those books was released in 1983 called The Power and the Land and accurately predicted the 1990s recession globally. He also wrote another book in 2005 which was published then called Boom and Bust, I can't remember the full title, but Boom and Bust, the Coming Recession or Depression in 2010. Which accurately forecasts the 2007 to 2009 global financial crisis. So, you know, I'm not saying that the future always repeats the past, and I'm not saying that these guys have crystal balls and can always do it, but so far they've both been very, very accurate based on some work by a guy called Henry George that really understood this stuff a while back around, you know, just timing cycles and the fact that there are good buying opportunities and there are really good selling opportunities as well. And you know, the money is made when you buy and the money is made from being patient, so that's why timing and learning are equally important.
So the next phase after learning, when we're talking about how to build momentum with property investing, is generating a really high quality strategy to actually execute on those investments that you're going to be purchasing to help you achieve financial freedom. So identifying where you're at right now is really important and where you want to be in the future. So once you've identified where you want to be in the future, pulling it right back and actually executing on the perfect next step.
I love what you just mentioned then, because property investing is two things. It's having an idea of where you want to be in the future so it can be pulled through all the shit that we have to go through as investors, and then obsessing about your next step. Now, most investors get caught up about everything that they need to do. There's only one thing that you really need to do as an investor after you understand where you want to be in the future, which just replace your current annual salary. That's a great starting point. That's all you need to know. The thing that you need to do to achieve that is identify a strategy that's going to allow that to happen in a reasonable period of time, and then obsess about which market, which suburb, which type of property, what price point you're going to pay for that property. And that is your job, and that's where most people come unstuck with property, because they think owning a property or owning a number of properties is enough. And that's unfortunately why 60% of investors do lose money on what they buy, because they're not being thorough in terms of buying metro markets over regional. They compromise the set of rules that we know work in investing in property, like buying closer to the city on the beach, buying houses on big blocks of land, close to transport, close to quality schools, timing the market, timing the right state at the right time. It's not good enough to just go, I want to buy a property. I live in Sydney right now, it's 2018, and you know, yes, Sydney's gone through 100% growth in the last 6 years, but Sydney always grows in value, so I'm just going to sit here for the next, you know, 3 to 10 years while Sydney does nothing. And you know, I'm not saying that that's going to happen, I'm just saying theoretically, sitting there having your money doing nothing is worse than actually owning an investment property.
So that's where it comes back to the learning as well, and making sure that you understand all of those things. You understand the global cycle, you understand the local cycle, so that you can identify what the right strategy is going to be for you to actually take action on that next step.
And a really simple strategy, if you're looking to really understand what type of strategy might suit you, is a video we've recently recorded called 2 Properties to Financial Freedom. It's just a very basic idea of looking at buying one house and adding a granny flat, buying another house and adding a granny flat, and effectively owning those 2 houses and 2 granny flats outright at some point in the future, giving yourself or your family, you know, that freedom that you're looking for. So, you know, after you've done the learning, which is continuous every single day, I'm just obsessing about that and continuing to grow. And then after you've identified the right strategy, so you know where you are, you know your next step, you know where you want to be long term, it's about taking quality action. And the biggest thing with taking action comes back to patience, because it's not about just buying a property, it's about buying the best property at the best price in the best street in the best pocket of the suburb. And again, we've done heaps of videos like how you can identify the right property, how you can identify the right market, identify the right suburb, and you can go back through and check some of those out. But effectively, taking action isn't about rushing in and, you know, how many properties you own. And to me, it's more about the quality of the properties that you own, the quality of those assets that you own, and about taking very, very calculated, focused action, as opposed to just jumping in and then realizing 5-10 years down the track that you not only cost yourself in terms of missing out on growth on the right asset, but you've really had to stay in a job that you hate, or you've had to stay away from your kids for longer than you wanted to because of that time and that, you know, compound effect of growth over time that you've missed out on. So I think the final part of, you know, how to build momentum, after you've talked about learning, after you've talked about strategy, after you've taken that action, is really understanding this concept of results. And results to me mean, you know, that's the delayed gratification. That is this concept of the flywheel. That is this concept of the seed. You know, it's the last thing that you see, and that's why most people fall off this journey. So I think what's important from a results perspective from me is to trust the process. Now, an example of this is if you had bought property in Sydney between 2012 and 2010 and 2016, the result would have showed that you've made about 80% on the average property. In some instances, you've made 100%. But if you had bought in the 9 years prior to that, so, you know, sometime between 2002 and sort of 2010 or 11, the results would have showed that you made literally less than 1% per annum over that 9-year period. And why that's important is because it takes time for the results to come through. Now, if you had just timed it right and read those books and actually known that that was coming, you probably would have, you know, made your 80 to 100% over that very specific period of time, and you wouldn't have had your money caught up there earlier. But if you didn't know that, the great thing about the market and about time and results is, you know, even if you're talking about buying in 2001 and holding through till 2016, it's, you know, it's still a 15-16 year period of time. If you divide that 80% or 100% that you would have gained over that period of time, over that, you know, number of years, your property's still doubling in value over 15 years. So, you know, whether you're that really astute, sophisticated investor who's figured out the market and, you know, can make those gains by timing things effectively, or you're that, you know, just buy and wait type investor, as long as you're not buying at the very, very top before a GFC, the market can be really forgiving over a 15 to 20 year period of time, and you can still achieve, you know, great results in your life. But, you know, for some people in Sydney, myself included, I was frustrated by how slow things were moving between sort of 2011 and sort of 2012-13, and exited out of a couple of properties, and exiting out of those properties cost me 100% growth over the following 3 to 5 years because you know, I just wasn't patient enough to wait for it, and I thought I could, you know, take my money out of there and buy assets that perform better. And, you know, it's just, you'll understand these things with time as an investor. You'll understand that patience is really the name of the game, and that, you know, timing is the name of the game. But just remember, whether those results come really, really quickly or, you know, a bit slower, they should come if you've got the right strategy, you're buying the right markets, and you're buying the right time.
Yeah, so if you guys want a bit of a hand with understanding some of these things, getting a better grasp on the different markets in Australia and where you can source the information to find that sort of thing, and a little bit of help sharing some ideas about strategy, we'd love the opportunity to offer you a free 1 hour 60-minute strategy session where we can talk about any of those things. We can talk a bit about the flywheel and how to build momentum, how to start learning the right things to make sure that you don't make any mistakes, how to potentially create a strategy where you want to get you from where you are to where you want to be, and then talk about taking action as well.
Yeah, so if you're interested in that one-on-one session with me or Simon, you can jump over to www.pumpedonproperty.com, click free strategy session, and find a time that works for you. Now, those sessions are for people that are considering buying properties in the next sort of 3 to 12 months type thing. There's hundreds of videos that we've recorded on this channel, the Pumped on Property YouTube channel or the On Property channel. You know, if you're just starting to collect information, keep checking out these videos, watch the podcast, jump over to our blog and collect all of that information. Then when you're in a position where you really want to lock in some of that strategy stuff, we'd love to talk about that. And you know, we have, as a buyer's agency, bought over $250 million worth of property now for our clients in Sydney and Brisbane predominantly. So if you're thinking about getting into the marketplace, we'd love you to book that session and learn more about where you're at and what you're trying to do. So to wrap everything up, we've sort of talked about momentum in a big way. We've talked about the flywheel and the concept of the seed. We've talked about patience and how it's not going to happen as quickly as you want it to. We've talked about timing, and then we've talked about building momentum from a property perspective, which is really about learning about getting the right strategy in place, about taking calculated strategic action, and then being patient for the right results that will come through over time. So thanks so much for your time and attention, and can't wait to catch up with you again.